Welcome to Global BC Presents. I'm Sophie Lui, here in Stanley Park, what we like to think of as the crown jewel of Vancouver. It's hard to think of this place ever burning down, but that's not out of the realm of possibility, according to writer John Vaillant. In his book, Fire Weather: The Making of a Beast, John writes about the devastating 2016 Fort McMurray fire, which destroyed thousands of homes and forced 90,000 people to run for their lives. We sat down with John to talk about the Fort Mac fire, the climate change that fueled it, and why it should serve as a warning to us all. I want to start with what is fire weather? It's the title of your book, obviously, but what does fire weather mean?
Hot, dry, and windy. Really conducive conditions for fire. It's a technical term used by forestry and by fire scientists. And it's basically when the humidity is low, the heat is high, generally in the summer, but increasingly in early spring, as we're finding in really painful ways right now. And it's when fire is able to ignite and spread across the landscape just that much more easily. And that which brings up a really important point in terms of this moment we find ourselves in of crossing these invisible thresholds. And some of those thresholds have to do with humidity and temperature and a bit of El Nino dryness and low snowpack. And all these contribute and create these kind of bigger spaces for fire to move and grow in. And that's what we're finding year on year.
Yeah, and so it's getting worse.
I would say it's trending that way. Yeah, I think, you know, we had the summer from hell, frankly, last summer. This summer is not looking much better. That doesn't mean we couldn't have an easier summer, a wetter summer in a year or two, but the general trend between now, 2030, 2040, hotter, drier, more fire on the landscape, longer season.
How has fire changed since we're discussing 2003 when that devastating fire went through Kelowna?
Right.
How has fire changed over, the past 20 or so years?
Yeah, it's really interesting to talk to firefighters about that. And that's why I coined the term 21st century fire, because it seems and behaves qualitatively differently from what people were more used to in the 80s and 90s. And talking to firefighters, for example, in Redding, California, after the fire tornado of 2018, and this was an actual EF3 tornado generated by the fire's energy and by the dynamic winds in those valleys. And this 20-year veteran from CAL FIRE saying to me, I've never seen anything like this. I've never seen destruction like this. And what really struck me is he said, it didn't used to moonscape, meaning the fire didn't used to burn everything, down to the mineral soil. It didn't used to moonscape. And I saw exactly what he meant. And, fire is a natural part of many forest systems. And obviously these are not moonscapes. They recover and fire moves quickly and more lightly. And now it's that much hotter, that much more intense, and it does more lasting damage that's harder to recover from. And so you have that on the one hand, and then on the other hand, with that lower humidity, higher temperature, drier fuels, because when you have year after year of slightly higher temperatures, you're just going to the evaporation is going to penetrate deeper. For example, in the case of these logs that are lying all around us right now, they are reservoirs of water under normal circumstances. But if you have a 2 or 3 week long heat dome, it will evaporate and that will become dry and then it will become flammable. And that's what happens to the soils too. And so we don't notice it. As civilians, we don't really notice it, but the forest notices it and fire capitalizes on it. And that's what we're seeing, and it's really shocking. Well, the forest doesn't look that different to me, but it's behaving differently. And that's because that reservoir, if you will, of humidity and deep saturation isn't there anymore.
So when you said fire capitalizes, like you talk about fire like it is the main character in your book. You talk about it like, or you write about it, I should say, you write about it like it's a living thing. And you ask that question in the book as well. Is fire alive? It seems in your book like it's alive, like it's a menace.
So I cannot ascribe human qualities to it, but so we can't say fire is alive, but we can say that it's lively. And we can say that it is energized by oxygen just as we are. You know, we're not going anywhere if we're not breathing. And fire isn't going anywhere if it's not getting that influx of air, which is carrying the oxygen. And so, like us, you know, we're moving around looking for food. Right now, you're making your living interviewing me, so you're traveling around far from home, you know, gathering things unto you. That's what fire has to do too. If it sat in one place, it would consume all the fuel and it would go out. We've seen a candle go out. So it's hunting. It's hunting for more and breathing as it does so. Its mobility, the fact that it can reproduce itself with embers, the fact that it can lie dormant for a while and then revive. It has a lot of qualities that are very similar to living creatures that we know and are. So.
And it seemed like it was hunting in Fort McMurray.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so why did you choose Fort Mac? This book is about the Fort Mac fire, obviously, but it's about a lot more than that. What was it about Fort McMurray, about that fire, that piqued your interest?
Well, we all saw those images coming through our Twitter feeds and Facebook feeds back on May 3rd. And to see a city the size and with the kind of the charisma that Fort Mac has, you know, it's larger than life. It's a force, you know, in the country. Yeah. And so to see that city disappear under a fire cloud that we soon learned was 45,000 feet tall and not know what was going on under there. So see the cars streaming out, to see these shocked civilians who really didn't know what hit them, wondering, some of them, where the rest of their family were. And then to also, day after day, the cloud was still there. You know, people were basically gone, but nobody knew who was left. I was really frightened by that. Who might be left there? And so, you know, I think there was kind of a rallying of Canadian solidarity there. Like, my goodness, this absolutely traumatic event, a disastrous event has befallen this important city, and we don't know who's left in there. So that caught my attention, needless to say, as it did all of us. But then, as I got better information about how intense the fire was and how it wouldn't leave, and I knew enough about urban fire and wildfire to know that it generally just rushes through, kind of like a storm, and then it's gone. It doesn't come back. You know, oh, I missed a spot.
But this one did.
This one did, day after day after day. And what was also really different was night after night after night. And so this night burning is, again, another feature of 21st century fire. Historically, you know, in more normal climatic times, prior to this excess of CO2 and methane that we've generated, you know, through our combustion activities, our own combustion, the fires used to settle down at night. You know, the temperature would drop, dew would fall, and the firefighters would get arrested. The fire doesn't go out, but it doesn't spread aggressively. The firefighters could say, okay, I know where you are, I'm gonna go get 5 hours of sleep and I'll come back and I'll deal with you in the morning. Now, there's no rest. So this happened in Redding, this happened in Santa Rosa in 2017, I think, in California, happened in Fort McMurray, happened in Lahaina. Yeah. The fire doesn't rest, so the firefighters don't rest.
The Fort Mac fire chief, I think, said we're rewriting the book with this one.
Yeah.
I mean, he was an urban, that's an urban department, but yes. There's so much crossover now.
Well, and that's the WUI, that's the the wildland urban interface, which is where we find ourselves here in Stanley Park. Yeah. You know, there's a thickly settled area right through the trees there, and here, you know, is a forest full of trees that are, you know, could be highly flammable under, you know, heat dome type circumstances. And so that, you know, it really used to be, there was almost this understanding, you know, you stay out there, fire, you stay in the woods, we'll stay in town, and we'll be good. You know, we'll send the wildfire fighters out to deal with you. And now, and that's how I think how people felt in Fort McMurray. You know, city's been there for a long time. It's had a big population for, you know, a good 20 years. And fire had never come into the city. but there had been fires around the city many times. And so that compact, if you will, that understanding between fire and the humans was violated. And the fire said, forget it, I'm coming in. Everyone is shocked by the speed. I saw the smoke plume out there, and now I'm running for my life. And something happened in between, and what happens in between is the embers.
We're here in Stanley Park. Feels like we're, in the middle of the forest, and we are, but right outside of this forest. And you can hear the activity. You can hear the planes going overhead. We're in the city.
Yeah.
And the West End is right outside here.
That's right.
What is the worst case scenario? Is it possible?
So, Sophie, this is honestly what was a motive for me in writing this book. When I saw what the fire did in Fort McMurray, which is in the subarctic. It's very cold. There were ice on the lakes. There were ice on the riverbanks when this fire broke out in 2016. And I thought, if a fire can do that there, what could it do in a more southern city? A big wooden city like, Vancouver. A lot of the west side of Vancouver and the West End, there are wooden buildings. And, full of trees, full of cars, full of flammable things. And then we have this reservoir of fuel here, which is how fire sees it. The forest, we think of Stanley Park as this beautiful, kind of tame, placid, somewhat damp sanctuary, that the whole city can enjoy, which is true. But it has this, it's kind of a Jekyll and Hyde kind of a nature to it. That in the case of a heat dome, in the case of a lot of beetle kill, the looper moth, that has impacted so many hemlock trees here, that changes the nature of it. In August, if we, break some heat records again and we don't have rain for a couple months, we could have a very explosive fire scenario that could spread, into the West End, and depending how the wind, we've got some very intense sources of wind here up in the mountains and Georgia Strait. So if all those tumblers, fall into place at the same time, but one of the things that 21st century fire has shown us is that firefighting becomes secondary. It really, the primary role of firefighters in these bad modern urban fires is life-saving. They're just trying to get people out in one piece, partly because the fire hoses, our traditional methods for firefighting aren't effective when you're dealing with 500 Celsius radiant heat coming out of a wall of trees. And that's what happened in Fort McMurray. That's what happened in Lytton. That's what happened in Lahaina, in Valparaiso, in Chile just a few weeks ago. It's the intensity of the heat that simply evaporates the water, takes the water and just runs it up into the fire column, and the next time you see it is this black hail coming down from 30,000 feet. So we're not used to that. We're not ready for that. We've read stories like that in the Bible and in mythic disasters, but this has now happened in Canada a number of times.
So are we still not ready for it, or do we still have blinders on, like when it comes to Stanley Park again? Like, you think, well, we've got the Vancouver Fire Department.
Sure.
They'll take care of it quickly.
Yeah.
But it can get out of control pretty fast those conditions.
And this, this is,
and we have the wind right now.
Yeah,
just demonstrating.
Yeah, and it's, so, Sophie, I really don't mean to be pessimistic. I'm trying to be realistic. But what I heard from people I interviewed who have been through fires like the Reading fire, tornado, Fort McMurray, big fires in Australia, is everyone is shocked by the speed. I saw the smoke plume out there, and now I'm running for my life. And something happened in between, and what happens in between is the embers. So you may see a wall of flame out there, a safe distance away in the forest, but the embers are moving. And again, this is this invisible threshold issue. When it's a little bit drier and a little bit hotter, those embers last, stay ignited a little bit longer. And when they land, if it's 11% humidity in the ground instead of 25% humidity, that ember is going to light up. And 11% humidity is how dry it is in Death Valley in July. That's how dry it was in Fort McMurray in May of 2016. So that's what Canada is capable of now. Yeah. People studying climate change often say these are cities built for the 20th century. They're not built for the 21st century. They're not built for rising tides and rising ocean levels. They're not built for the incredible temperatures that are now impacting cities in Asia. No, we aren't ready for it. And I think to get politicians and the citizenry up to speed is really crucial. Because it's expensive economically, but it's also expensive personally. And when you see, 250,000 Canadians on the road fleeing fire, as they were last summer, that's 250,000 Canadians. No one would have believed that 10 years ago.
No.
If someone said, this could happen, yeah, no, and the numbers are there. I think it was actually closer to 280,000 people. So that's more people than live in all of Regina, Saskatchewan, on the road, not sure where to go.
It seems like every year is unprecedented.
I know. And so this is something, people talk about the new normal. Mm-hmm. And it sounds good. I'm a media guy. I like the sound of words and all this. New normal sounds really good. It's really misleading. And I think we should, right here, you and me, promise not to use it anymore. Because what's really going on, where we really are now, is in clima incognita. It's the unknown climate. We don't know. And it's going to be surprising us continually for the rest of our lives. With our emissions, we have created an environment that allows fire to burn more intensely. So when the final tally is done, did humans get the better end of this deal, or did fire get the better end of this deal? And the jury's out on that.
So we talked about the risks here in Stanley Park. What other parts of BC do you think are potential Fort Macs? I guess
Nelson,
anywhere.
Harrison Hot Springs, Quesnel, I think the west side of Vancouver.
The west side.
I'm on the east side. Think about it. These are 100-year-old wooden houses jammed together. And those little alleyways between the houses, my house is, 2 meters from my neighbor. And when one of those is on fire, the wind starts to suck through there like a chimney. So
that little gap between.
It takes a house fire and turns it into a blast furnace. And no one was thinking about that when they built those places. It was a rainy, cool. We had pretty British weather here. And these are facts we have to reckon with. And
the thing in Fort McMurray as well, not wooden houses, but vinyl.
Even more flammable.
More flammable, yeah. And what was inside them. And there's so much irony,
yes.
Tragic irony in what happened at Fort McMurray.
Yeah.
I pulled a quote from your book. That same combustive energy that thrilled, empowered, and enriched them in Fort McMurray was now manifesting itself in the most primal, potent, and destructive way imaginable. In other words, the combustive energy of oil that made them rich was turning against them.
Yeah, and it's really kind of unfair. Pretty much everyone left their home to go work in Fort McMurray. That's already kind of a hardship. And then it's a hard environment to work in. You're working really intense hours. You're holding up your end of the deal. You're doing your job. What it highlights is the job that you're doing is all about fire. It takes billions of cubic feet of natural gas to render bitumen into synthetic crude oil. That's what's going on up there. Intense fire is burning there all the time, man-made fire. With our emissions, we have created an environment that allows fire to burn more intensely, more broadly across planet Earth than it ever has in human history. So when the final tally is done, did humans get the better end of this deal, or did fire get the better end of this deal? And the jury's out on that right now.
How did the fires of last year, Lahaina, and here in BC, West Kelowna and Shuswap, as you mentioned, how do those compare to what we saw in Fort McMurray in 2016?
Well, Lahaina, I mean, the loss of life, it just takes it to another realm of horror. And so Fort McMurray was tragic in its way, but we didn't lose people. And I think in a way, Canada dodged a bullet. That could have been an unspeakable tragedy. Imagine you have a city of 80,000 and, 1% of the people don't make it out. And we all, nobody knew, because that huge pyrocumulonimbus cloud was sitting over the top of the city for days and days, and no one knew what was going on. Who was left? And so it's incredible that, and it says, a huge amount about the cohesion of Fort McMurray and of the diligence of the first responders who went into every neighborhood, really against all good judgment. It was dangerous up there. You could not see through the smoke, and the heat, again, the radiant heat coming out of the forest was 500 Celsius. That's as hot as Venus. Humans don't do well, in an environment like that. And yet firefighters, police officers, other citizens, were going door to door to make sure people were out of there, and they got them all. And really, it chokes me up to think about it. That is, those are neighbors. Those are the people you want living around you, really looking after you like that.
So, do you think Canadians are getting on board with these things? Are we taking our blinders off?
I think people are, but it's really a cultural change to reckon with the real and tangible impacts of climate change, and also to address the causes of climate change. And, fire is not a cause of climate change, it's a response to climate change. And so, decarbonizing, needs to be front and center, and also fire smarting and fireproofing as much as we can. And, we're Canadians, we can do two things at once. We can handle this. And so we can handle it, but we need to have our eyes open and not be in denial, and not be able to live with this kind of strange, magical thinking of we can expand our petroleum production with impunity and have it magically not have anything to do with a climate that is now much more conducive to fire. And these are connected, not just in Canada, but globally. But, Canada is a G7 country. We have some of the smartest, most capable people on Earth, and great scientists, great inventors, incredible talent, great work ethic. We can handle this. We can handle both of these things.